Hey guys, so we're here in Tucson 2020 and we are gonna have a nice interview with our three cutters here. So that should be something interesting. Hopefully you'll love it and see you in the lounge. Welcome to the first AsiaLounges video interview. This will be a conversational interview with the three professionally trained cutters. First question I'd like to ask you guys and ladies is to introduce yourself ever so briefly, starting by the ladies, starting at my right, then going to you, Mary, and eventually to the bald lady in the center, Justin.
Okay, so my name's Laura Phillis. I'm a professionally trained cutter from Australia. I'm based in Adelaide in South Australia. I've been cutting for just over 6 years. I was professionally trained by a master cutter. We did a lot of repair work, inlays, recutting, cabochons, faceting, everything. And from there I grew that and started my own business doing more of the same.
Mary, if you will.
So my name is Laura Bellard and I'm a gemologist, FGA, and I've been trained also and graduated in the jewelry industry. And I'm a gem cutter. I've been a gem cutter for 2 years now, a couple of years. 1 year with a master in France, and he taught me to use a jam peg. And also, when I arrived in the US a year later, I started to discover the American machines, the modern machines. And now I'm here. I just opened my business 6 months ago, and so far so good.
Justin?
My name's Justin Prim. I'm located in Bangkok, but from Chicago, and I've been cutting for, I think now 7.5 years. I started through the Lapidary Club system, kind of as a hobbyist cutter, with ambitions to become professional. And once I relocated to Bangkok, I started to, train under a couple different master cutters, and and we opened the school, so I got a lot of practice that way too. So now everything that I'm doing is kind of on a commercial cutting level.
Okay. Are the three of you using the same type of machine?
So I was trained using an Australian brand machine called a Gem Master, and I mean, what do we call it? It's got a mast. It's not freehand or anything like that. So I don't know about you guys. What do you use?
Yeah. I'm using a handpiece machine, so like a Imahashi style Sri Lankan machine with a handpiece that we can sort of pick up and look at. So
like a tang.
Yeah, like a tang. Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm almost the same. I'm using a jam peg, so it's in wood.
Oh, the wooden board.
Exactly.
With the holes.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And I just have the stone and the handpiece and the stone in my hand, so I can look every time with the loop. And I put it on an Ultratech, a V5. So it's half modern and half old ways and traditional, because my jam peg is from 1880s.
So you've got your jam peg head on your Ultratech base?
Exactly.
Oh,
wow.
So sometimes I switch the mast with the modern ones, and it depends on the cut.
Okay.
So how does the jam peg sit on a mast machine? How do you remove the mast and apply the jam peg whole board?
Well, it's funny because I'm using a lock from a bike.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it works really well. So I have a little mast with the jam peg in metal that I've brought from I picked up from a printer, and there is a piece of metal on the base in the shape of a U.
Yep.
And then I put the little lock on inside, and then I lock it with the little lock of the bike, and it works really well.
Wow. So
that's fascinating.
And maybe you should point out also that your mass machine is quite funny because the quill comes off.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. We all say handpiece, but a handpiece is a very different. So that's why I wanted to say yours is a tang, which is kind of like a slingshot looking shaped thing. And
I never thought of it that way, but okay, yeah, that works.
well, I'm trying to explain, I guess, for the viewers how they differ, because your handpiece, I don't know a lot about JMPEG, but your handpiece is kind of a stick, right?
Exactly.
My handpiece, it's called a quill, and I mean it's kind of an elongated thing with a index dial on the end of it, which goes which attaches to my mast, and then Justin, yours is the slingshot shaped tang.
But hers actually, she can pull it off her quill comes off the mast, so she can check her stone just the same way we do.
Every time you take it off, and then you
not every time, but it depends what stage I'm cutting. So if the stone's sitting at the mast at my eye height, I can look at it fine with the light. If I'm fastening things like the girdle and it's down here, I don't want to be looking down here, so I'll take the quill off to check it. Or at the end, if I'm polishing and stuff as well, I'll take it off just to so I'm keeping a better posture as I'm looking at it. I'm not moving the light in my body all the time.
So that's kind of a pretty cool feature. Like it's a bit.
Well, I forget this. It wasn't until we started chatting that I've always learnt on Gem Masters. I've worked on 3 different Gem Master machines, and that's just how they are. And it's an Australian machine, so I'm not as familiar with the American machines, where apparently this is really unheard of. But
yeah, I've never seen another machine that does that.
I think as a professional cutter, I couldn't imagine it any other way, because you're constantly checking on the stone and what you're working on. So
so that kind of gives you an edge over maybe the other mass machine cutters, because you can.
I think it would really annoy me if that quill didn't come off. I couldn't cut any other ways.
In your opinion, what are the biggest difference between commercial cutters and competition cutters?
Good question.
Do you want to start that one, Justin?
Okay. I guess I've kind of transcended from one to the other. So I guess I have an idea about it. But basically, to me, the difference probably comes down to speed and maybe
different stages and the process as well as speed. I think.
I mean, I think we kind of been saying this the whole week. Like, in competition cutting or hobbyist cutting, like the meat points become it's sort of an obsession, and also the polishing, the super high level polishing quality for the competition. And I think for us, it's not so important, because it's really just about making a beautiful stone, right? That we can do in a reasonable amount of time.
I mean, obviously, everyone wants to cut a nice stone, but when you're a professional cutter or a commercial cutter, was the term you used, we're doing it for commercial purposes, we're doing it for the trade, we need to be fast. We're getting paid by the hour or paid by the carat.
Exactly.
So we have to be faster than a competition cutter or a hobbyist cutter for that reason, because no one's going to pay for 600 hours of work on a stone.
Yeah,
so, I guess for me and chatting with you this week, and I'm sure it's the same for you as well, less stages, less grids, less polishes perhaps, or less pre-polishes. Again, if I'm recutting a stone that was maybe originally a native cut or cut overseas in Thailand or India or places like that, the meat points already don't meet. So if I'm recutting a stone like that, I'm going to recut it the same, or I'm going to recut it with often I cut it better than it was to begin with, but it's less important if the angles and the ratio they've used on that stone doesn't have perfect meat points, because I'm doing it to be fast and to, I'm doing lots of cutting jobs in a day, and I need to make my money for that day.
Yeah.
So exactly. Yeah. Well resumed.
So, and what do you think with the JMPEG? Like, do you think it gives you a certain speed advantage? Because this is what I've always learned, is the JMPEG is so fast.
You can be really fast with the JMPEG, but you need to take more time to learn.
Okay.
Because with a traditional machine, you can learn faceting really quickly in about, I would say, I don't want to make any mistakes, but I would say around a year. You are ready to be a commercial. Not really with a JMPEG. You need to take more times to master, because everything is by hand. You push the stone on the lab, and then this is basically only your strength in your hand that will stop you to go further or everything.
So it's more experience with the feel of pressure and just positioning. From what I've seen of JMPEG, I haven't seen a lot, but they do it so, and I'm sure you do too, so fast. They know the position they have to put it in.
You have a feeling. You don't use diagrams, so you have to just the teacher, the master, teach to the students only by voice. There is no papers to learn.
There's no
So
guidebook.
exactly.
Yeah.
So it's it takes more time, but you can really be fast as any other person.
Great.
It's
And you kind of brought up diagrams. It's kind of an interesting thing. Are you using diagrams when you're cutting?
No. Do you know what? When I first started cutting, and I still have these little note papers of, I scribbled down some indexes for a round brilliant and a cushion and a trillion and things like that. And when I first started cutting, I really liked the unusual designs. I would cut stones from the Magus books. I love those books, but I probably haven't opened those books for years. And I mean, if I'm creating a new design I do a lot of it. I do most of my cutting freehand. And if I'm creating a new design, sometimes I'll scribble down numbers that probably only make sense to me, whether it's an index, whether it's an angle. Sometimes it's a bit of both. It just looks like probably a mathematician's page of numbers, but it means something to me. But otherwise, and most of my stones, I'll write that down once and I won't repeat that cut. I might cut something similar, but I don't repeat it. So it's mostly up here for me. Yeah.
that's great.
In average, just how many stones a day can you do, guys?
Look, if I'm having a really good day with no interruptions, no messages, calls or emails, maybe 7 or 8 stones in a working day, full top and bottom. But I mean, there's not many days.
In a working day?
Yeah. But I don't know. I couldn't do a 5-day week of that.
How big are those stones? Like 20 carat?
No. No, like, between like 1 to 3 or 4 carat stones.
Okay.
Yeah.
Full cuts?
Yeah, full cuts. I mean, again, that's really broad. It depends on the faceting design. It depends on how many facets. It depends if it's a round brilliant, which is ingrained in my head, or it depends if it's a freeform cut that I'm sitting there and mapping out as I go along.
Depends on the design.
Exactly. So, but you look, most days I would say I'd probably cut about 5 because there's interruptions. If I'm looking at dimensions or quotes from a customer, if I'm having calls or emails, or I've got to go to the post office and post orders and things like that. So there's interruptions in work days and stuff. But I'd say comfortably 5 a day, but 7 or 8 if I'm really.
That's good.
What
about you?
Well, I would say more about per week because I split my time with my gemological work because I have many customers where I have to evaluate their treasure, and I would say I cut 3 to 4 stones per week.
Sure.
So, yeah.
I think for me, because I'm teaching half the month and cutting half the month, I'm splitting my time a lot too. But if I have a full day, or like if I get into a rhythm of a full week, which hardly ever happens anymore for me, I'm doing 2 or 3 stones per day.
Okay.
But usually mine are closer to
They're bigger.
Yeah, they're bigger. I mean, sometimes even in the 10 carat range.
Sure.
So if I'm doing a 10 carat stone, if I do 2 a day, that's like amazing to me.
Yeah, that's great. Well, and bigger stones obviously take longer, but you want to take more care with them as well.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So I can understand that. I mean, look, don't quote me, I'm not cutting 5 stones a day every week, because I'm a one-woman business. I do my own social media marketing, I do photography, I do other things as well. So, if I can cut 5 a day for 5 days, that's a good week for me.
If we had assistants to do all that stuff and we could just cut all day, wow,
easily,
how efficient would we be?
Would be great.
Easily, yeah.
Do you think it's important for a gem cutter to have a gemology background?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Okay, why?
Do you know what, for me, I was a gemologist before I was a gem cutter, so I can't tell you what I didn't know before I was a gem cutter. But I've spoken to a few gem cutters who aren't gemologists, and it's really interesting the things they don't understand about or don't naturally learn from. They learn things as they go, obviously, but some people have said cleavage planes and fractures and twinning. They don't understand about that. Also pleochroism, which is hugely important when assessing the rough of a gem. So as an example, for the viewers watching this, Australian sapphire, which I cut a lot of, it'll have a blue colour down one axis of the crystal and green down the other axis. And a lot of these stones are tumbled stones, or you don't know how not many stones come out as a perfect crystal to me as a cutter, but you need to know how to orientate that to get the colour you want. So if you want to get it, all blue, you need to orientate it perpendicular to the the blue perpendicular to the table. If you want to orientate it green, you orientate that perpendicular to the table. If you want a nice party colour, which everyone seems to love, you want to angle it sort of semi-across both. And then there's also the other factor that, as well, especially in Australian sapphires, as well as pleochrosm, there's colour zoning and banding and all these other factors. So it's such a really important factor of being a gem cutter to know how to manipulate or optimize color in this way. Also, I think if you're buying gems that you're wanting to cut, it's really important to have that gemological knowledge. If you're buying a parcel of stones, there could be synthetics, there could be maybe some tourmalines or garnets mixed, or spinel and garnet mixed together, or if you're buying stuff from Madagascar or Tunduru, there's like zircon, garnet, chrysoberyl, there's all sorts of stuff. So you need to know about crystal systems and UV and other testing.
And sometimes when you buy rough, especially when you're in the mining regions, like sometimes the miners don't really know. Like I've seen miners tell me that garnets are rubies because they found them in the similar locality, and it's like, okay, look, couldn't be a ruby. It doesn't have pleochrosm. So,
and if you learn those things, you can have handheld gemological tools for buying. But it's hugely important. I mean, it'd be great if you found a ruby in a garnet parcel and you could,
The other way around doesn't really make any sense. Were you a gemologist before you started cutting?
Yes. I was a gemologist for 4 years before I started cutting. Mm-hmm. And I agree with you both. It's really important to have at least the basics. And especially the cleavage planes. I was thinking about the topaz.
Yeah.
Where I have a friend that was not a gemologist, and he started to cut a topaz, and it split in two.
Wow.
Because it was right
on the cleavage. Wow. So. And that's the thing, people, maybe hobbyists learning to cut, if they haven't been told that or they don't understand it, they think, oh, well, I did something and the stone just broke. They didn't understand what caused it to happen, and it could have been avoided as well. So,
exactly.
I think I could give a million reasons why it's important to be a gemologist if you're a gem cutter, I think.
For me, I have a kind of a different path than you guys, because I was a gem cutter before I became a gemologist, and I still have this sort of vague memory of what it was like when I used to cut, because I remember for like maybe 2 or 3 years I was cutting before I went to gemology school, and I remember not really understanding, like, in California where we can mine like many things from nature, we would have jade and we'd have serpentine and we'd have like rhodochrosite and all this stuff, and I just remember thinking like what is the difference between, like, I don't know, jade and serpentine? Like, they're both green, but they don't look the same. But like, if you don't understand gemology, how could you even have a frame of reference for like
exactly
what's the difference between two green stones? And then when you get into fine material, if you can't distinguish a garnet and a spinel, or a garnet and a ruby,
you could lose a lot of money. You could be, and not only that, synthetics we talk about a lot as well. The closer to the mine, the more synthetics there are. Yeah. So you could be buying a parcel that's been peppered with synthetics or fakes. Yeah. And a simple test would be a UV torch for things like that. So, understanding that they exist, understanding that not every gem dealer is honest, and understanding how to differentiate that for yourself, I think is.
Well, and also like the physical phenomenons that we need to understand for cutting, like refractive index. Like if you don't understand gemology, I mean, refractive index is not that complicated, but if you know nothing about gemology, it's kind of confusing. And I remember, when I was in the lapidary club where no one was a gemologist, but some people had a lot of personal experience, and there was almost like, rumors, or like urban legends, oh man, I heard about windowing, like somehow this happens, and it's like a mysterious phenomenon. But once I went to gemology school, like everything became very obvious. Like, okay.
Well, look, here's a couple of good examples. I bought a parcel of garnet from Tanzania, really nice peachy colours, some sort of brown cognac type colours, and I was really excited for this really large piece. Well, it was larger than the other stuff in the parcel, and I polished, I'd fully cut the pavilion and I'd fully cut the crown, and I started polishing the crown, and the first facet I polished, I was like, that's really weird, it looks like doubling. I can see through this side kite facet. I'm going, it's garnet. I'm going, no, I'm going, funny, I'm making it up. I need lunch. I'm got blurry vision.
Need a break.
And I kept polishing. I'm going, oh, this is definitely zircon because zircon has really strong doubling. And I waited to get it off the dop, and I tested it, and I did 3 or 4 gemological tests. I'm like, yeah, it's definitely zircon. And so my gemological knowledge told me straight away. I polished the first facet, and I knew it wasn't garnet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And again, if you don't know some of these phenomenons about certain gems, or even how they handle. I've had it when I was cutting, repairing stones for jewelers, and the customers told the jeweler, oh, it's a sapphire or it's a tourmaline or something like that, and certain stones will polish in certain ways with different laps. So I know if it's a sapphire instead of a tourmaline, or if it's a synthetic instead of a aqua or something like that, because aquamarine and synthetic spinel are often mixed up. And they polish in different ways. A spinel is a harder stone and it takes more to polish. So even the feel of cutting a gem, my gemological knowledge tells me these things. Mm. Or even the same with cabbing and stuff like that too. The smell of a gemstone. If it's onyx that's been treated, it smells of sulfur and things like this. And it's not just...
Yeah.
But I think I learned that as a cutter, the smell and the feel of cutting. The same with jam peg, you have to get a feel for it.
You have a feeling, and you must hear. So it's really important.
Yeah.
And you can hear when it's too late, and you can hear when you have to go a bit further.
Absolutely, yeah.
That's the point of view of 3 cutters that are from the West, obviously, but how do you consider the fact that the vast majority of cutters in the East, case in point Thailand, who happens to be cutting the vast majorities of ruby sapphire in the world, are mostly not gemologists, and yet do that rather well?
Thailand and Sri Lanka both have a pretty good history with rubies and sapphires, and they kind of came up with them. They know that one stone really, really well. I think this is true for a lot of the regional cutters. Like if you look in Brazil, the cutters know emeralds and quartz really, really well. Whereas like in Sri Lanka, the cutters don't know how to do quartz there because they don't have quartz in Sri Lanka. Yeah. And so, for them, it's like maybe the sort of necessary gemology knowledge that they have comes from the training that they get from their master cutter. But for us, because we have to be so much more diverse. If you only ever cut rubies for your whole life, which, we know that that's true. There are some master ruby cutters that are the ones that cut the biggest, best rubies because they know them better than we ever will, because we wouldn't have time to specialize that way. But we can also do quartz and whatever else, right?
Well, and that's a really good question, a really good point. I know a Sri Lankan guy, and he's got a cutting factory, and he says, well, if it's a tourmaline, I've got a really good tourmaline cutter. And if it's a big sapphire, I've got a really good guy that does big stones. And it's the same in Australia. I wouldn't say there's very many professional commercial cutters. Up in Queensland, where sapphires are mined, there's obviously a lot more cutters near any mine in any part of the world. And in Queensland, there's a lot of people that have been cutting sapphires for 30 years, and they're probably really good at it. But they've never cut a garnet, they've never cut a quartz, they've never cut aquamarine, things like that, and they just haven't touched those other stones. So for those, they probably freak out at a topaz or whatever. But also they're used to cutting the stones that are near their mines.
Whereas, who knows, they might have a special trick for dark sapphires that even the Thai cutters don't have, because they're not used to those super dark Australian style sapphires. And
that's the thing, if you specialize in one stone like that, you will learn the optimum angles and the refractive index to use, where to cut in relation to the refractive index. Whereas I've cut I feel like I've cut a lot of materials. Most materials I've cut, as soft as fluorite, I've cut bone, I've cut shell, I've cut, all your semi-precious gems. I've cut diamond. I've tried cutting diamond with a tang. So, and it's all different. It's all, like I said, we have to be more versatile.
So I'm kind of curious, because you were just talking about angles, and we're talking about, using gemology to, use the refractive index with angles. So how does angles work for you on the gem peg? Because you don't have
There is no angles.
Yeah, there's no angles.
Do the holes mean different things?
They mean something, but no angles. It's the teacher. He teach to the students how to create, for example, an emerald cut, and there is next to the holes there is numbers, and every numbers means something for a specific diagram.
Sure.
But there is no angles. So it's just that, for example, for the first step of the crown for a step cut, you need to use the number 14.
Sure.
And it works that way, and it works really well because the light return at the end when it's finished and polished is amazing, and there is no window. Like most people think.
So there's kind of less versatility. I understand what you're saying. There's sort of pre-selected optimum kind of hole, not things for this, and there's less versatility in changing that up, I suppose. I mean, I don't know how to explain this, but I understand where this is going. When I cut diamond, we used a tang, and each tang, so I've only cut a couple of round brilliant diamonds, and they have a different tang for different shapes you cut a diamond. So the diamonds that I've cut, they had a tang for a round brilliant pavilion, they had a tang for a round brilliant crown, and they had a tang for a table on a...
And so they were kind of preset.
And they had preset, it was still an index wheel, but they had preset notches for round brilliant, and it was color coded, and
because they
had preset angles to get the optimum, is it Tukalski?
Yeah, Tukalski, yeah.
So they had preset angles. You set the base angle, and then it just had a flicker. It just flicks to the ratio for the next.
Okay, so it's already almost automatic.
It's already, it's basically, so it sounds a bit similar to the jam peg. It's already sort of angled to be optimum notches almost in that.
And
that jam peg.
there is some numbers that we use really for all the designs. No, for example, I always have the number 14 because it's always the first step of the crown.
Sure.
So yes.
But if you have a big stone or a small stone, is it?
You can raise the mass of the jam peg, and then you adapt. But you adapt at the beginning.
Okay.
When you start cutting the stone.
So the holes basically are just a way to help you remember how the diagram works in your head.
Exactly.
Okay, that's cool.
So, which do you find a difference in time if you were to cut an emerald cut on the jam peg or the ultra peg?
Yes. So I really prefer the jam peg for the emerald cuts because I'm used to it. I know how to cut the emerald cuts. I remember only with my teacher, so it will be easier for me. I don't have to watch the angles and change the index and everything. Everything is by hand, and I turn while I'm cutting.
Sure. Okay.
So it's really fast. I don't have to stand to take off the dop and then just watch the stone. Yeah. So I'm faster with the jam peg, with the emerald cuts. For other designs, it depends.
Okay.
What about like round brilliant? You know,
round brilliants. I think I would be faster with the Ultratech.
Okay.
Because it's round and it's easier to spin the thing than the.
Also, yes, I don't look every time. I don't just stand the thing. I just I turn a little bit and then I change the angles. But I just raise the dop really from a little high.
Sure.
Speaking about the dop, crown or pavilion first?
Pavilion first.
Pavilion first.
Really? I'm the odd one out here. Yeah, I'm crown first. I'm surprised. I would have thought French style you guys would do crown first.
Well, there is some that do the crown first, but I'm feeling more comfortable with the pavilion. Okay.
Is there a reason pavilion first?
Do you know what? It was just the way I was taught, and I couldn't imagine. I can't get my head around how you could cut the crown first. I'm just used to cutting pavilion. Then you've already got the optimum angles. You're not going to window it. Yeah. And then I work with obviously leave enough space for crown. But if I was to cut the crown first, I'd be worried I hadn't left enough for a pavilion, or if there's an inclusion, I had to take that lower.
Me too.
I'd worry.
For us, the technique that we use, since we hand preform the stone first, so we always know. I mean, if you're doing a light stone and you preform it, you can see in the stone when it's wet, is it windowing or not? You can see it in the preform. But also, you could also physically measure it. If you know that you need 60% depth versus width, then you can take some calipers and say, okay, it's 10 millimeters wide, so it needs to be at least 6 millimeters deep. Yep. And then when we get in with our angles, we might take it down a little bit more, but we have a little bit extra room. Okay. We've made it. We won't make a sharp cone or something. We'll make a round shape.
More of a belly.
But then we like that better because then we know where the culet point is, so we know where the middle of the stone is. So then when we dop, it's perfectly centered.
Yeah. Okay.
But then also, crown first. I mean, I don't know if there's a real good reason for crown first other than its tradition, but one benefit of it is when we do the transferring, so I do wax first, and then I'll flip the stone, and we don't need a transfer block. So, like, we can just put the stone table straight on the dop with super glue, and you can center it by eye.
This is what I do.
And
and I think this is a funny one that I don't talk about a lot either, because again, it was the way I was taught. I don't leave it on the dop to the pavilion and then dop it to the crown and soak it later or something. I completely take it off.
You take it off completely. Yeah.
And then glue it, because again, it was just the way I was taught. And
but it works.
It works, and I think it saves time
precise.
rather than I don't know. Do they soak it off? Do they heat it off with the pavilion?
Usually with the transfer block, you have your original stone that's waxed or glued or whatever, and you put it in there, and then you line it up with the second one.
Sure.
And then I think what I used to do, and what I think a lot of people do, is they've got a handheld torch, like a creme brulee
and
torch.
that's how they get it off. Yes.
And they heat up one side, and the dop just falls off, and then it's glued on the other side. What about you, though? Do you?
I do like Laura. I just once I finish the pavilion and it's polished, I just take off the stone, and then I readjust with the crown.
I want to mention here though, I don't use wax, so I use 2-part epoxy glue. But when I was taught with wax as well, more for sapphires than other stones. But so I'm used to adjusting by eye and flattening with the tweezer to get it flat and things like that. But I do it with a 2-part epoxy glue. So I mean, I still wait for the glue time. But
how long it takes?
Maybe I allow about half an hour. In winter, I might allow a little. In summer, I might allow a little bit longer because it's warmer weather. But yeah, it was just the way I was taught.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I just had a question before as well. When we're talking about crown and pavilion first, what were you taught at the Lapidary Club when you first started? And were you taught pavilion first there? We've adapted.
Yeah. I mean, American style's pavilion first. So for
so
the same reason.
When you
I mean,
went to Thailand, that you
the main argument was the same when you said, like, make sure that you have your perfect angles on the bottom so you don't window the stone. Which I totally agree with that. It makes a lot of sense. But if you,
it's interesting you've tried both and you found a way that works better.
Well, if you preform and you know that you have the right depth, then you're fine. But I don't know. But and as far as the transferring goes, like, I think it's harder to take the stone off, if you don't know what you're doing, to put it back on in the middle. But the thing that's good is sometimes when you cut whatever is the first side of your stone, if it wasn't perfectly centered and you still cut it right, but if you use a transfer block, you'll transfer the non-centeredness of, you know what I mean? It'll just be just as, whereas for us, or I guess for all of us, when we transfer it, we have the chance to put it back into the center again.
Yes.
And if we make a mistake, actually it doesn't matter.
I still use a transfer block, but the stone is completely, after I've cut the pavilion, the stone is completely loose. I'll put it in the cone or redop, and with the glue in that part of it, and then I'll still use the other stick in the transfer.
What if it's like an emerald cut? You use a V-dot?
Yeah. Yep. If it's either, if it's a pointed culette, it's a cone. If it's a wedge, what's the word for it?
Keel.
A keel. If it's a keel, V-dop. Yeah. So I do still use, because I'm using the glue, I still use that to hold it, because again, if it's summer, if it's a bit runny, I can't just put it in the my block and just hope, not like wax. Wax cools really fast.
Yes.
So
what about you? Are you using wax or glue or both?
I use wax, and with the Ultratech I use the epoxy.
Oh, okay.
But yes, I don't have any angles on the dop. For me, it's just
flat.
A flat dop.
Oh, because you're using a wood dop, right?
Yeah. So
sure.
I just have to, when I finish the pavilion, for example, let's say an emerald cut again. Well, I just have to use a block of steel, and then there is a V shape in it. I put the dop on it, and then it stays really flat.
Okay,
and
so
then
it's
I
kind
push
of the same
it
thing
against
what she's doing.
a flat thing. Yeah.
So basically, instead of having a V dop, she's just got a V hole in the bottom of her stand thing.
Yeah.
I want to mention as well, because people find my dopping method strange, and because I'm using epoxy glue, a lot of people ask how I line it up with the index later, and maybe you guys are the same. Well, JamPeg
index lighting
with the index later.
Oh yeah.
So when I go to put it back in my quill or my handpiece, I usually find one of the girdle edges, so I don't polish the girdle until the end. So it's still sort of matte finish on, say, 1200. I find a clear part of the girdle where there's not glue overhanging it, or if there's glue overhanging, I'll just cut it off a bit with a Stanley knife or a blade. And I put it at I put my handpiece at 90 degrees, and just on the 1200 lap, when the machine's off, I just ever so slightly lower it so that it sits, that edge of the girdle to sit flat on the lap.
Yeah.
And I just ever so slightly brush it. Again, sound, you've got to hear it. And I check where it's rubbing on that girdle. If it's rubbing evenly across, then that's sitting flush, and I'll tighten it. If it's you can tell if it's not even on the girdle, if it's showing like a white mark to one side.
Okay.
And that mark just wipes off. So once I've tightened it, then I know where my girdle is, and I can work out my positions on my index as well.
I do the same thing, except for I do it on a polishing lap, and I put a little.
Okay, sure.
If you have a little bit of grease on the lap, then when you pick it up, instead of seeing that white mark, you'll see
the
grease on one
The
side.
grease, yes.
Yeah.
I do also with the grease.
Yeah.
And so you're using only wax you have to use wax on the JamPeg stick because glue can't stick to the wood, right?
There is nothing you can do, just the wax.
So when you transfer the pavilion into the wax, and then you're pushing it against your block again.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, when I learned with wax, we would really only dop the pavilion, like for doing recuts and stuff, for example, in sapphires, we'd just dop lots throughout the day. So we just had a cone or V-dop with wax, and we just use flat tweezers to sort of, like, you'd be looking with the light, and you'd be pressing, going, does it look flush? And sometimes these native cuts that we were recutting, the girdle would be wonky, so
But everything is by
do
eye.
it. Yeah, absolutely.
You're able.
Yeah, but the block thing sounds cool.
Yeah.
You try everything.
You've got to look. Yeah, I think as a commercial cutter, you look for these hacks.
Yes,
save you
exactly.
time and
You don't have always the tools, so you have to make them sometimes.
Yeah.
Looks like we're slowly reaching the end of this interview, or rather this discussion. So how can people reach you online through the different social media platforms and websites that you may or may not have? Either way, please pass them on.
So my name's Laura Phillis. I'm Tatum Gems. You can find me on Instagram at Tatum Gems. You can find me on Facebook at Tatum Gems, and I have a website where I sell my stones, which is tatumgems.com.au. Justin?
I'm also on all the same platforms as you.
Ooh,
but
we should connect later.
Okay, you can be Instagram friends. But so on Instagram, you can find me just as my name at Justin K Prim. Facebook, though, everything else basically our cutting company is called Magus Gems. So you can find us on Facebook, Magus Gems. That's Magus Gems, or www.magusgems.com, which goes to our web store. Facebook, Instagram. Yeah.
And the same for me. So on Instagram, you can find me on Amaterra Gems. And
how do you spell that?
I was going to ask the same thing.
AMATERRA and Gems. And on Facebook, on just Marie Alice.
Marie Alice, okay.
And that's
Cool. Thanks, guys.
You're welcome. Thanks
Thanks,
for this
Simon.
Thanks
interview.
everyone
Thank you for the
for
interview.
popping by today and
So Tucson 2020. It's good to get a
together.
whole bunch of gem cutters together and see what's.
I've learned a lot from this discussion between the different types,
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
and I'm sure the viewers will too.
Yeah, I guess it's not really. I guess for me at least, I see a lot of JamPeg cutters and I see a lot of mass cutters, but I don't usually get to sit all in one room. And usually,
there we go.
usually the JamPeg cutters don't speak English. Almost all the ones I met, whether
so I speak for my French colleagues.
Yeah.
But Thailand. I never get to have conversations with JamPeg cutters.
It's a closed world, and I think it's too bad. It's really too bad.
Yeah.
I think as well, I mean, gem cutting is a bit of in Australia, I think it's a bit of a dying up, but JamPeg especially, with more and more high-tech machines coming out and digital gauge machines and things like that, JamPeg is the old way. As you said, it's.
I think it became an art because it takes time, and people don't have time anymore.
Correct.
To learn.
Yeah.
And but it's a shame because I have the feeling that as a French cutter, I really want to keep this traditional way because I don't want it to die because it's really it's still a good way. You can be as fast as any other method. It's just that it takes a little bit more time. But you need passion. You
Time
need
to
be passionate.
to get the feel of it, not
Exactly.
just
The gem plate cutters that I've met in Europe, when the master cutters that I've seen, they're definitely the best cutters I've ever seen. Like because
they are.
because it's so hard to do what they do, and especially even not to put the French down, but like the English and the German as well don't have an index gear. So whenever they do a really good stone, I'm just like, oh my god!
The Germans especially.
Yeah,
Yes,
it's
they're
like
really good.
wow, you're just holding the stick in your hand and
that's it.
and that's it. So those guys are so good. But yeah, it's a dying art for sure. So
well, thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for everything, guys, and see you on another time, perhaps.
Excellent.
you want to have some Asia Lounges outro catchphrase?
No.
See you in the lounges.